After delivering the slap, Lady May takes a deep breath, letting out the frustration that had been bubbling inside her. Miss Bella's lackeys quietly warn May that she's crossed the line by slapping her fellow actress. They remind her that an actress's face is her most valuable asset, and she can't just go around slapping people. Although Lady May inwardly admits that she acted on impulse, she still has no intention of apologizing to this trashy woman. She also recalls her time with Prince Carter, noting how men may seem all muscular and strong, but their weaknesses are in their eyes and throats. If it comes down to dealing with these lackeys, she's confident she could drop them with a single kick. So she doesn't falter and steps up to confront them. But just then, Prince Carter shows up. He announces that he's here to arrest anyone who insulted Prince Roland or schemed against his theater crew. Bella and her two lackeys are shocked to see the prince's knight, and Bella is pretty sure they're screwed since she was the one who belittled the prince's play. Later that night, Knight Carter and Lady May have a great time together, chatting and enjoying each other's company. But we are not interested in their lovey-dovey shit, so let's jump ahead 2 days. Inside the castle of Border Town, representatives from the 5 families have gathered from around the western region. Prince Roland reveals that he has received reliable intel indicating that Timothy has sent soldiers to Longsong Fortress. Their numbers are unclear, but there's no doubt they're coming for Border Town. He explains that Timothy's typical strategy involves kidnapping commoners to bolster his forces, then making them eat the church's drug. This drug, known as the Evil Crimson Pill, grants commoners strength even greater than that of knights, but its side effects are fatal and irreversible. Timothy plans to weaken the Western region's power by turning anyone useless to him into drugged berserkers, making everyone here in danger. As the leader of the Western region, Prince Roland instructs all the representatives to mobilize their personnel into the fortress. By doing so, Timothy won't be able to strengthen his forces. One of the members raises a concern, pointing out that they don't have enough food and supplies to sustain such a move. But Prince Roland makes it clear that they'll have to bring everything they can, and they only have 3 days to do that. Every commoner must be transported to the city, and once Timothy's soldiers are defeated, they can return home. All the representatives kneel in respect, and once they're gone, Prince Roland turns to his army captain, Iron Axe, and explains that this army is different from the last one they faced. Timothy's soldiers are currently sailing down the Redwater River, planning to infiltrate through Willowtown. He explains that this route is especially tricky because once they pass the river fork, they'll have the option to attack the fortress's south and east gates, or continue west to lay siege on Bordertown. To avoid spreading their troops too thin, Prince Roland emphasizes that they need to focus their best soldiers on ambushing the enemy at the Redwater River fork, as it's the most strategic point for a successful defense. He further explains that Lightning and Maggie will keep an eye on the enemy's movements, so they don't need to station extra soldiers for defense. Instead, they just need to set up an ambush for a single decisive strike. He also notes that Longsong Fortress will need 100 soldiers to watch over the aristocrats, so he doesn't want any surprises while everyone's focused on the Redwater River. Iron Axe will handle the artillery and board the ship at Littletown to meet him at the river fork, and our boy himself will rush there as soon as he's done with things at the fortress. Nightingale, looking worried, asks if the prince is really planning to go himself. The prince nods, saying no one else knows how to handle the witch's abilities like he does, so it's crucial for him to be there. Once their boat sets sail, we see all the new witches, along with our 2 familiar girls, on board. Leading this operation is our eager prince, who makes it clear that while he might not be a master at commanding large armies or planning full-scale assaults, he definitely knows his stuff when it comes to tower defense and tank warfare, which is his specialty. The camps are set up near the river, and just as the prince is about to drop some knowledge on what tanks actually are, Nightingale chimes in, saying she gets the idea of trenches and towers, but has no clue what in the world a tank is. That's when our boy explains that tanks are like carriages with cannons mounted on them, even sketching out a rough drawing in the sand for everyone to see. But then he admits they don't have enough horses, and the cannons also need to be transported with the ships as well. So the prince concedes that what they have isn't really a tank. But he suggests that if they don't have enough horses, Honey could tame some tigers or cougars to pull the cannons instead. Nana then asks if cannons pulled by tigers still count as tanks. The prince, with a grin, proudly says yes and even suggests they could call them tiger tanks or leopard tanks. That's when Lotus speaks up, asking the prince what her role will be in the battle against the fake King Timothy. The prince explains that they need to set up 2 perimeters on either side of the river. He draws a line in the sand to show the enemy's route and points out where their troops will be stationed on both riverbanks. The plan is to launch a surprise pincer attack, and to hide everyone, they'll need to build dirt structures in a V-shape along the banks. These structures should be long with sturdy walls, and each will have 8 rooms with 1 small window facing the river. Lotus appears to be still confused, and says that while they can hide their troops in the mud houses, they won't be able to attack the enemy's ships. If the ships don't stop or dock, they might just sail past. The prince reassures her, saying she doesn't need to worry about that. He explains they've got all sorts of long-range weapons for dealing with the ships. He also mentions that Leaf will use wild grass and vines to camouflage their setup. The prince can almost hear the victory music playing in his head. It's just a matter of time before Wendy transports all 16 cannons into the mud houses they're about to build. With that firepower, no matter how many ships Timothy has, they'll be at a serious disadvantage against his attack. The enemy won't stand a chance. The next day, a knight starts barking orders for all soldiers to get ready for the attack. Hearing the command, the soldiers quickly scramble into the bunkers, which are completely camouflaged under a thick layer of grass, thanks to Lady Leaf's work. Inside the bunkers, the soldiers start prepping their cannons, and they can't stop singing the praises of the witches. They're amazed at how the witches built huge structures overnight and instantly summoned grass and vines. They're even hearing rumors about one witch who can turn into a giant pigeon. The soldiers can't believe how these extraordinary abilities surpass anything mere mortals can do. Just as the soldiers are chatting and having a good time, someone reports that enemies are closing in. The soldiers rush to load the cannons, ready to spring into action at Miss Lightning's signal. The ships are definitely getting closer, and Sylvie confirms they're almost at the ambush point. Lotus is a bit anxious as the boats appear on the horizon and the prince has not yet made a move. But then bam! The ships are hit from all sides by a barrage of cannon fire. Lotus is completely blown away by the sudden and intense bombardment. The soldiers on the ships are completely helpless, dropping like flies under the relentless cannon fire. Lotus is still trying to wrap her head around what's happening, her mind spinning trying to understand how they're pulling this off. With people crying for help and blood everywhere, Sylvie quickly starts feeling queasy from the chaos. Lotus rushes to check on her friend, while the prince, observing the carnage, advises Sylvie to take a break. He offers her a handkerchief, which she accepts gratefully. Sylvie notes that these weapons are probably the incredible invention she had heard rumors about. She hadn't taken it too seriously at the time, but now she can't deny the power of such a weapon. Suddenly, the surviving knights from the ships scramble onto the solid ground, raising their swords and charging at the beach flanks. But let's be real, these knights are marching straight into their doom. Our soldiers, ready and waiting in the bunkers, start hammering the knights with gunfire. The enemy quickly realizes they've been ambushed and scrambles back to their ships, beginning their retreat in a hurry. Meanwhile, the prince watches the whole thing through his telescope. He tells Iron Axe that it's time to finish cleaning up the rest. If any of the chief knights are still alive, he wants them taken prisoner for questioning. He also instructs Sylvie to go with Iron Axe to keep an eye on the enemy soldiers, making sure no one gets away. The charming witch Sylvie quickly agrees to the prince's instructions. She now understands why the prince is so confident in publicly sheltering the witches. With such powerful military capabilities, even the church's divine punishment army might struggle to overcome him. If Princess Tilly could wield such formidable weapons, she might not need to hide anymore, and the enemy could find it nearly impossible to launch a successful assault. Iron Axe finally returns from his mission and reports back. He's managed to capture only 2 knights. The first introduces himself as Duke Snake and immediately begs the prince to allow him to send a message to his family, promising a huge ransom in return. The second knight introduces himself as Edward Shield from the Shield family in the northern region, and he too claims that his family is willing to pay a ransom for his release. With a terrifying tone, the prince asks them if these 2 are the ones who launched this attack. Duke Snake quickly speaks up, stating that their captain, Duke Vincent, was the one in charge, but he perished in the battle. He pleads with the prince to release their handcuffs, insisting that he wishes to be treated humanely before his ransom is arranged. The prince, however, makes it clear that he's not interested in a ransom. All he wants is the main goal of the attack and Timothy's next move. If they provide this information, he'll let them go. The 2 knights apologize and firmly state that they can't divulge any details. They've sworn loyalty to Timothy and refuse to betray their king. We can tell that the prince is really bothered by their response, so he simply turns on his heel and starts walking away. He tells Iron Axe that the fate of these knights is up to him, and makes it clear that he doesn't care what happens to them, as long as he gets the information he needs. Iron Axe quickly agrees, telling his soldiers to take the 2 knights away. Before they leave, the prince reminds the captain that once the interrogation is over, the 2 knights should be counted among the casualties. After all, they brought this on themselves by invading the western region and involving civilians in their mess. The next day in Border Town, the prince learns that the soldiers they defeated were just the first wave of Timothy's forces. Iron Axe confirms that this fits Timothy Wimbledon's strategy, revealing that Timothy is sending waves of refugee armies to attack the western region, using similar tactics to those employed at Clearwater Port. The prince asks if all the soldiers are civilians. Iron Axe replies that it's a mix. Some are criminals and troublemakers among the refugees. He explains that Timothy captures these people, makes false promises to pacify them, and then forces them to take the pills. This way, they fall entirely under Timothy's control, and Timothy needs more pills to keep them under his influence and manage their pain and desires. The prince feels a pang of sadness for those forced to take the pills, because the pills only offer a temporary reprieve, delaying an inevitable death, and he knows that even one pill means they're beyond saving. Iron Axe agrees, noting that Timothy never mentioned the pill's side effects to those people, and everyone was tricked into believing they'd receive status and rewards after fighting. Duke Vincent had underestimated the defenses of Border Town and thought that 1,000 drugged commoners would be enough to take down the Border Town. Iron Axe further reveals that Duke Snake spilled more details during the interrogation. Timothy had planned to split the commoners into groups to attack the town, while keeping an eye on their defenses. The prince makes it clear he won't let any enemy soldiers get away this time. Since Duke Snake was part of the first wave, he asks if they know anything about the next waves. Iron Axe shares that they didn't get many details about the second wave, but Duke Snake did mention it would be much larger than the first. The prince is disappointed to see Timothy squandering valuable lives as cannon fodder. It's hard to believe his brother could be so reckless with such a costly gamble. The prince then points out that once the Demons of Months arrive, the entire western region will be covered in snow. If they're going to attack, it needs to happen before winter hits. This means he plans to drag out the battle. Iron Axe asks if they should send a messenger. The prince thinks it won't be very effective. To make Timothy rethink his strategy, they'll need to cut his forces and show him that sending commoners into battle won't work against the western region. The prince spreads out the map and explains the urgency of their next moves. He explains that he was too slow and cautious in spreading news about the western region and recruiting more people. To cut off Timothy's options for gathering commoners for his forces, they need to recruit and interact with commoners, just as they did with the refugees in the capital. He emphasizes that the war-torn southern region is the most critical area to address next, followed by the northern region. He plans to release the prisoners to send a clear message, ensuring that Timothy's forces won't attempt another futile assault. Iron Axe raises a concern that releasing the captives would expose their strategies and weaponry. However, the prince reassures him that Timothy will remain in the dark about the specifics of their weapon strength and manufacturing capabilities. The released captives will only reveal the extent of the weapon's power and not the intricate details of their operations. Additionally, these captives will carry a warning letter to Timothy, which will serve as both a strategic and psychological advantage. Iron Axe looks puzzled, so the prince clarifies his strategy. He plans to announce a specific date for a major offensive and then lay siege on the capital during that time. This will not involve the First Army, but rather an unexpected aerial assault by the witches. He explains that while the chance of actually killing Timothy is slim, the primary objective is to create a significant psychological impact. By demonstrating their ability to strike directly at the heart of Timothy's power, they will shake his confidence and destabilize his rule. The goal is to make Timothy feel threatened and uncertain about his position, thereby achieving a successful operation through fear and disruption. Well, that was a lot to take in. I'm sure this episode was more dialogue-oriented than action-packed, and we didn't see much progress on the industrialization front. Nonetheless, it was a great episode. I guess having character development and compelling narration is what makes Release the Witch special, regardless of how dialogue-heavy the series is. I enjoyed narrating it. On a particularly sunny day in Border Town, Margaret is enjoying some cold ice cream while giving a shout-out to the prince for his brilliant strategy that has shaken things up in Grey Castle. Because of this, Timothy has repeatedly failed to take down Bordertown. She further shares that she's heard rumors about the Black Flag fleet raiding Seabreeze Town and Golden Wheat City before sailing to the north, and no one has any clue where Garcia went with her Black Flag fleet. Since Garcia is now out of the picture, this means that Timothy's only target left is our boy. She enthusiastically offers that if the prince wants to leave Grey Castle, the Bay is ready to welcome him with open arms. There's enough land on their island to even set up 10 border towns, and she and the other merchants would be more than happy to provide all the land available to border town citizens. The prince, though, already knows where Margaret is coming from. He's not about to trade his steam engine and paddle steamer blueprints with the merchants like that. Even if he lost to Timothy and ended up losing Grey Castle, he'd prefer to head to his sister Tilly Wimbledon first. Margaret then asks the prince about the hot air balloons, and he reveals that he's already working on them. He's managed to manufacture 2 so far, but he points out that they're not quite like the ones she's ridden before, and they don't require a witch to operate either. When they head outside, the prince shows her one of the balloons they've created. He explains that it has a port at the end for loading gas, which is what makes it fly. Refilling is pretty straightforward, because all you have to do is just connect the hose to the tank and twist it open. He also mentions that the balloon is resistant to rain, fire, and even bird beaks. Margaret is amazed about all this, but curiously asks how many gas tanks each balloon needs. The prince tells her it's about 5 or 6. Margaret then inquires if the gas is very expensive, and the prince pretends it is, saying that gas isn't something just anyone can produce. But deep down, Prince Roland is practically doing a happy dance because, contrary to what he said, making helium is a breeze. All it takes is mixing sulfuric acid with reactive metal in the tank. And since he doesn't have any metals on hand, he can simply get help from Sister Lucia to extract high-purity metal for the reaction. Meanwhile, Margaret acknowledges that the formula must have come from the blood, sweat, and tears of Bordertown's esteemed alchemists, who worked tirelessly to make it happen. So, without a second thought, she decides to buy some. The prince then humbly reminds her that the canisters can only be stored for a year and must not be incinerated, struck, or disassembled, or there will be severe consequences. He adds that while it might be a little expensive, Bordertown will offer deals and discounts for their customers. That's when Lightning chimes in, announcing that the balloons will come with pre-filled complimentary gas, a camouflage cloak, and a warranty. Customers can also purchase a yearly membership subscription for additional discounts. A while later, Prince Roland is feeling pretty pleased with himself. The deals he struck with Margaret have generated a lot of revenue, which means he can now invest in boosting the population. By the time he builds the city next year, he is sure that the Redwater River will be lined with neighborhoods. Meanwhile, Anna and Lucia are hard at work. Anna perks up when she sees the prince strolling toward them, and the prince quickly squats down after approaching them, asking how things are going and if they've found anything worthwhile. It seems like Anna and Lucia are focused on producing a metal with incredible resilience, hardness, and tenacity. Lucia dives into some technical details, and overall, they're quite satisfied with their results. Anna even mentions that this project is more interesting than smelting musket barrels. She further happily reveals that she can completely transform an iron block by adding another metal to it, and she's eager to understand how these metallic atoms bond together. The prince is thrilled to hear this, and explains to us that Anna and Lucia are working on an extraordinarily useful task. Lucia's job is to break down ores into different base elements, while Anna melds them with iron to test their qualities. Using Blackfire's malleability, Anna tests the hardness and tenacity with varying amounts of magic. As the prince walks away, he's buried in a book about chemistry, detailing everything about iron and its properties. He knows that even tiny changes can cause significant shifts in a metal's properties, which is why they're testing those thresholds. A while later, the prince is sitting on a bench, and the falling leaves are a clear sign that autumn is approaching. As the prince starts dozing off, Anna jolts him awake with a tap on his nose, telling him not to fall asleep outside, otherwise he is going to catch a cold. He suddenly asks where Lucia is, and Anna reveals that she's having afternoon tea with Belle. Just then, Anna reads Roland's troubled face, so she moves in close and asks if he has something on his mind, because she can see it in his eyes. The prince remains silent for a moment, then grabs her hand and pulls her closer, admitting that he's feeling a little troubled about something. He explains that he had brought the commoners in the border town from the capital with the help of everyone. But there are still a lot more people stuck in the capital who are not willing to leave the capital. The time is running out, so he is afraid that he has to be more forceful to ensure he saves most of the people, and they don't fall victims of Church's pills Timothy is making them to take. Reflecting on it, he admits that, in a way, he's more or less the same as Timothy, with the only difference being their goals. He wants people because he's aiming to build his empire, while Timothy wants people just to crush everyone. Anna quickly puts a finger over his lips and tells him she gets what he's trying to say. She explains that she's figured out what's troubling him. He's worried that people might not accept his help, that his goals might not always match up with what others expect, and that using harsh tactics, even for a good cause, could be misunderstood. The prince isn't sure if having a moral goal outweighs using a moral method. Anna reassures him not to worry, telling him she will always be there to help him no matter what. The next scene then takes us to the sea at the fjords on Slumber Island. There, we see a boat docked at the shore with different vendors selling their wares. Molly and another cute witch can be seen exploring the market area. All the while, Princess Tilly is observing everything through her telescope. She notes how Slumber Island is no longer just a hiding place for the original 300 witches. Although the Newbie residents live on the outer edges of the island, far from where the witches live, she's confident that with continued growth, Slumber Island will eventually become a city. As Tilly is discussing these developments to herself, Ash calls out to her, warning her about the heavy wind and telling her to come down before she trips. Tilly quickly uses the stone embedded in her